come up with the idea?
Gone down to college.
And all the neighbors would come.
Whatever. Says, I need someone to walk through this. I have an idea.
He loved guitar, and he never...
Stuffed animals.
He would laugh when I would do Shakespeare or something.
When it got to that place.
We finished the scene.
Hi, this is David Cassidy. Ever you've had any curiosity about me or who I am or what my life has been like or my career has been like, join me on Unscripted. I had many choices. I could have done anything I wanted. And because I knew from the time I was 3 years old, I saw my father on Broadway when I was 3. And I remember I was living in Manhattan with my mom and dad at the time. They were still married. And my dad was doing a Broadway show called Wish You Were Here. I remember being in the taxi cab after the matinee and driving back and saying to my dad, I remember the excitement I felt at 3 years old saying, I want to do that, Dad. And I remember them both. I can vividly remember them turning to me and saying, okay, you can do it, but you have to wait until you graduate from high school. And 2 weeks, I never thought anything else my whole life. I knew what I was going to do. In the last year of high school, I was the first and only non-professional to be accepted into the LATC, Los Angeles Theater Company. And I'd been working in drama. But I played in rock and roll bands, you know, and really bad garage bands, just for fun. I saw the performance where Clapton played with Cream at the Santa Monica Civic that was recorded, which is Crossroads. I actually saw that performance, and the only reason I know is I saw in the back of the album at the time that was the performance they used. I saw Hendrix, I said 5 times over the years, but I think I can only remember 4. Might have seen him 5, but I can only remember 4. And it was such an amazing time to be alive, you know, and be a teenager, and it was just fantastic. And I lived in New York. I grew up there until I was about 12, and then moved out here, 11, 12. My mother and father split up when I was 3 and a half, and we lived in New York, in Manhattan, where I was born. And then when I was about 5, I moved just outside of Manhattan with my grandparents, who were very elderly and religious. I became the soloist in the choir. I had to go to church on Saturday and Sunday. Saturday was for the choir rehearsals, and they made me go to Bible school. And my mom was on the road a lot. It was her mother and father. And my dad split. He went to L.A. and married Shirley Jones, who had just become a big movie star. And she did a movie called Oklahoma, and then Carousel, and then The Music Man. And I didn't meet her for a few years. But my influence around my mother and her family, they were all musicians. My grandmother, who basically was my surrogate mother, because my mom was traveling a lot, doing a lot of shows on the road and worked a lot. And my grandmother was a former opera singer and a pianist and a piano teacher. All of her brothers and sisters were all musicians. My father was arguably one of the greatest, I would say, legit Broadway singers of all time. Phenomenal actor, but I had it in spades on both sides, and it came really natural to me. Well, I played in garage bands just for fun in high school and all through the 60s. I saw, as I told you, the Doors. One of the Doors, the drummer from the Doors' brother was in my class in junior high school. I saw them at the Whiskey before anybody knew who they were. You know, if you lived in Los Angeles during the mid to late 60s as a teenager, you saw the greatest. The Buffalo Springfield performed at my high school in the auditorium. It was a remarkable time to be alive and to be living in L.A., and it had a lot of influence upon me. The Beatles broke when I was 13, and after I saw them on the Sullivan Show, first time when they first came over, I bought an electric guitar. Manipulated and controlled by the television, the media itself that I was bound to by contract. I had to perform, and at 24 was playing 17.
Working in construction.
Well, a lot of that story is based on my life.
Hi, this is David Cassidy. I think I'm going to continue to talk about myself, my life, the journey that I've had in my career, my faults, many. Please join me as we continue on Unscripted. And they were the biggest influences upon me and the whole generation. And I got to know them well, particularly John and Paul. But I got to know John really well. I played with both of them, not publicly, but privately. And I got to know John quite well, and Yoko too. And he was the biggest influence on me, I think, of everybody. They were. But John, because he was willing to give up everything for his passion and belief that all we are saying is give peace a chance, and all you need is love. If you listen to the lyrics, he reveals himself more than any other songwriter I've ever encountered and been influenced by. And to know him, and to get to know him as a 13-year-old who idolized him musically. I learned to play guitar by listening to Beatles songs. I picked up an electric guitar the next day after seeing them. All my friends and everybody else were learning chords and Beatles songs. And I still remembered the '63 Meet the Beatles, the second album, the third album, Rubber Soul. And he was way past that. He had written hundreds of songs, so he'd forgotten it. So I retaught him a couple of Beatles songs, and I got to sing Paul's parts, which for me, thank you, God, thank you, John, and I'll never forget that. That was truly, that was one of the highlights because I got to live my dream and imagine touring around in a bus and playing with your family, and, you know, I imagined being in the Beatles, like millions of others. I love to do what I do, and I always enjoyed playing. I loved the fact that I could do pretty much what I wanted to do. I was manipulated and controlled by the television, the media itself that I was bound to by contract. I had to perform, and at 24 was playing 17, and I was a much different guy than what I was playing. But I was very open and honest with the people that I knew that would talk to me. I was portrayed, because it sold merchandise, by the companies themselves that owned my name and likeness. And it didn't represent who I really was, but when anyone would talk to me, or they would ask me, like in Rolling Stone, when I was on the cover of that, it was groundbreaking because it was me. I had hitched up to the hate in 1967. You know, that was very different from the character I played on The Partridge Family. And that was 3 years before I ever did the show. I was not a professional. I was in high school, you know, so... you know, it was such a different world, though. You can't even compare it to today. It's not even, you can't define it, because unless you were in the atmosphere, unless you were in the air, unless you breathed the air in 1967 as a teenager, long before I became a professional and even graduated from high school. I was a junior in high school. The world was so different. It was so different that sex and drugs and rock and roll were of the moment and of the time. It was an innocence. It wasn't about South Americans or Afghan growing poppies. It was free love, and people walked around half naked and doing this, and they meant it. You know, I mentioned John Lennon before. He did a bet-in. The United States government tried to get him deported. The media destroyed him. They viewed him as a pariah, you know, and all he was saying is, I'm doing this for the purpose of stopping war. People cared. It wasn't about Cokes and, you know, Burger King. It was really more about the stuff. It was really about the substance, and people were willing to die for it.
We were just getting it working in construction. My mom and dad dances, but like going up.
Hi, this is David Cassidy. Please join me as I continue talking about those deep, dark secrets on Unscripted. In the 70s, it became more about the clothes, it became more about the hair, and then disco happened. That's when it changed. It all became about the bass drum. Thump, 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 thump. And it was no longer about anything political. It was about let's sweat. You know, The Last Dance. I mean, you listen to all of the songs, Love to Love You, Baby, and it was all about that. Do a little dance, make a little love, get down tonight. That's when it all changed. It all became very superficial.